Yay! Welcome back to the channel. Hey everyone, if you've been watching along at home, you know that I have been doing a series of conversations with carnivores. So today I'm actually talking to the beautiful Ali. She has got a Instagram channel and she'll tell you all about that along the way. But I've been following her because, part of the journey for me is actually connecting with other people who are having a meat-based diet. And so Ali's going to share with us today about her experience with a meat-based diet, what her intentions are, how she's got there, all of the things. So please join me in welcoming Ali to the conversation. Hey, Ali, welcome.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Awesome. So I did just mention your Instagram channel. Do you want to quickly drop that in there for us? What's the name if people want to follow you?
Sure. So the name of my Instagram is Eat Meat. So EATMEAT. Eat Meat, Live Free. All one word. Eat Meat, Live Free.
Awesome. So that then, of course, leads me into asking, what led you to choose that as your actual name?
Well, I found a lot of freedom in eating a carnivore diet. And so when I dove down the rabbit hole a little bit, I also discovered a lot of other things that were preventing me from living a free life, like being very restricted in certain ways and feeling like I couldn't be myself, if that makes sense. So when I discovered carnivore and started eating more of a meat-based diet, a lot of those feelings went away. I started feeling more freedom within myself. And so to me, those things just came together.
I absolutely love that because for me, I think I feel the same way as well, in the sense that I've had people ask me, do I get bored eating such a restrictive diet? Because from the outside, for them looking in, they're like, it's really restrictive. And I'm like, I don't think you understand how much food freedom I actually have now, even though I'm only eating these food products. I feel like I've got so much more food freedom and mental freedom and body freedom and all of the different spaces of freedom eating this way versus the other. Is that kind of been a bit of your experience?
It's been my experience, less so. I get bored. I've always been very open about that on my Instagram, the struggles that I have with not having variety, but that's only one small aspect of it for me. The rest of it is freedom. So as in the minimalist approach to eating, really. So I don't have to think a lot about what am I going to eat today. I know what I'm going to eat today. So that creates space in my brain to think about other things. So there's that, but also the freedom feelings for me is not being weighed down, because when I would eat healthy food that I was told was healthy, vegetables, whole grains, all of that stuff, I'd always feel very heavy after I ate, and I naturally blame the meat. And it wasn't the meat. So I always felt very heavy and tired when I ate those foods. So now when I stick with animal foods, I can eat and then just go about my business without having, heavy feelings in my gut, in my brain, especially that the brain fog has lifted. So my body and my mind feels free. So it's a bit of a trade-off for me. My goals are to be able to have a more varied diet. I don't want junk food. I don't want junk food at all, but some other healthy options that for me at the moment don't work for my body, like potatoes. I love potatoes. But when I eat them, I feel like shit. So that's the trade-off. Yes, okay, it's a little bit boring, but for me personally, but everything else that comes with it is freeing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. One of the things, because I do have patients that for them, they're like, oh my God, it's so boring to just eat meat. And one of the things I often talk to them about is that if that's where you're used to getting your variety in life, where you're used to getting your adventure in life, it's going to be boring for you. And so what you have to do is actually start to look at, is there other ways that I can create variety and adventure in my life where it's not just food. So I'm still meeting that muscle of I need adventure. I've got, we all have different levels of how much adventure we actually need. Some people need very little, some people need a lot. And for me, probably the reason that it's worked is that we've been traveling Australia for the last 6 months. And so I've got a massive amount of adventure happening in my daily life just by where am I sleeping tonight? Where are our tents going? All of that type of stuff. And so having really simplistic food is like, this is my security. It's the same, and I don't need to worry or think about it because I've got so much else that's going on in my life.
That's really true. And I never thought about it from that perspective before. So that's a good way to think about it. And for me, I'll definitely look at ways to make my life more exciting.
Well, I think the other thing is like there are a lot of people that are in this kind of meat-based space that are creating things like breads and cakes and those types of things, using eggs as their sauce and cream cheese and, making waffles. I personally haven't done any of that because, again, we've been traveling Australia and it's like, I can't carry a waffle maker and I can't carry these things that are actually going to do that. But I know for them, like expanding and playing and getting a bit creative has been how they've kind of beat that sort of food boredom sort of phase, was actually getting creative with making those things.
There are a lot of people out there doing some very creative things.
I'm like super simple. I'm like, let's cook steak with some eggs and butter and salt. But off I go. I'm really, really happy with that. So I'm curious, what led you to get to that point of a meat-based diet?
Okay, so really simply, I have suffered with very painful periods like my whole adult life, my teenage years as well, but they just got worse as I got older. So, throughout my whole adult life, I've always been a very health conscious person. So I've never really eaten trash food. I have, but not on a daily basis. I've never been a big drinker. I've always been very conscious of the kinds of foods that I eat. So I've always been sort of thought of as a health nut. And in my early 20s, I was vegetarian for 2 years. And within that time, I sort of dabbled in veganism, raw vegan, fruitarian, all of that stuff. And I actually felt great. I thought this is it. Like I found the diet that works, until it didn't. And then I was just craving steak and I needed meat again, and bringing the meat back in was great. So I've always sort of been on this journey to find what is optimal health. Okay. When somebody suggested to me that, maybe meat's not the problem, it was quite mind-blowing to me. So, so circling back. So over the last decade, I've had several verbal diagnoses, whatever the word is, of endometriosis. Mm-hmm. So the doctors have always tried to get me on birth control, and I'd always refuse because I hate the idea of messing with my body's natural rhythms and cycles. And so I just always said no. But I've had a Mirena inserted to try to help with all of that as well, but nothing really was working until I had my son. And for the next 2 years after he was born, I had no pain. I was like, I'm cured, it's all gone. And then slowly, over a process of maybe 6 months, it all started coming back, which I'm told is quite common for endometriosis. Mm-hmm. So I started seeing gynecologists again, and we were booked in for surgery to have it all cleaned up and sorted out. And then COVID hit, and all my surgeries were put off. And thankfully, within that time, I spoke to a naturopath who I asked her, look, can my endometriosis be healed naturally? And she said, well, yes, and led me down the path of the autoimmune protocol diet. She was a carnivore. She wasn't comfortable to tell me that yet. And eventually she came around and came clean with me and said, look, Ali, this is what I eat, and this is what I think will heal you. I told her she was batshit crazy. No way, I can't have steak without potato. I do love potato. And she basically said to me, well, do you want to get better or not? And that was really it. You either do this or you don't get better. You're never going to know if you don't give it a go. So in true me fashion, I researched the shit out of it. So she sent me books, podcasts, people to follow on social media, some really, really, really smart guys and girls, all of their information. And I just dove down this rabbit hole for a couple of months. I initially started as animal-based. So the label of animal-based includes meat, all meats and animal products plus fruit. So we started there. And within the first week, the first thing I noticed was no bloating. No bloating. I couldn't believe that I wasn't bloated because I'd suffered from severe bloating my whole life, even in my teenage years. That's the first thing I noticed. And I said to her, I can't believe it. Why am I not bloated? She explained to me why. At this stage, I missed it. At this stage, I'd actually given into birth control because the pain had gotten so bad for me. So the birth control got rid of all of that pain. I'd gotten so desperate at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So at this stage, I was on birth control, but my plan was to get off it so I could get off it without pain. So I don't know timelines. Everything gets very jumbled up, especially when you're a mum. I think I was animal-based for maybe 6 months before I tried to go off birth control. And so I did. I tried it. And within a couple of days or weeks, somewhere in there, I was in like instant agony. My stomach swelled up and everything, like all of my PMS symptoms just hit me like a ton of bricks. And it was bad. And then I tried to, this is just a transition period. But after a couple of weeks, I was like, no, I need to go back on. This is not working. And that's when I decided to pull the trigger on strict carnivore. So I was strict carnivore maybe for a month when I decided to pull the trigger again. These timelines might be messed up, but maybe around a month before I decided to stop birth control again. And I haven't been in pain since.
Oh my gosh.
So the PMS symptoms did start coming back when I started bringing in some more plants again. So that's something that I'm working on with my coach at the moment with healing the gut and doing a bit more intense work rather than just eating meat, which has been really wonderful. But generally, the endometriosis pain, I haven't had surgery to have it confirmed, but as far as I'm concerned, there's no pain. There was pain, there isn't, I'm good. Yeah.
I love that. And I think that you bring up some really important points in that for a lot of people, especially a lot of people that I work with, we have a lot of familial attachment to plants. So even just like letting go of them is hard, just from like, oh my God, I love potatoes or raspberries or whatever else. And, we've got a lot of attachment to those. And most people who go down this pathway don't necessarily go down the pathway to go, I'm going to eat steak and that's going to be all I eat for the rest of my life. A lot of them come down this pathway because there is some type of physical problem that has led them down the pathway, and they're looking for an answer and a solution, but they're still kind of hoping that maybe when they heal their body that they can bring back at least some of those plants, at least to make life enjoyable, a little bit more flexible, all of that type of stuff. And so that's a really, really common. And I think, even if I look at somebody like Michaela Peterson, she talks about how she would like to be eating all of this other stuff. And she's slowly, over her period of time been able to bring in just a couple of things here and there now. And, her hope is that she can expand that and be a bit more less lion diet and more carnivore and then maybe meat-based. And so what I'm essentially saying is, for those people who are watching at home, is that carnivore doesn't necessarily have to be the forever thing. Yeah. For me, I feel like it probably will, because I'm definitely a sugar addict. Like I 100% am addicted to sugar. And even a bit of fruit will kick me off, because I've tried a bit of fruit here and there. It'll kick me off into like, oh my God, sugar cravings. And like, I can't stop thinking about it. And it's like an alcoholic having a little bit of alcohol, like kicking them back off. So, at this point in time, I think I'll probably stay there. But whether I do or not may depend on whatever else happens in the actual future. So I'm curious for you, when you were making that decision to go strict carnivore, was it just, I want to get off the birth control, or was there some other stuff that was like, I wonder what would happen?
The birth control was definitely my driving factor. I think it was my why, my really strong why is to be able to live pain-free without the assistance of pharmaceuticals. I'm very much a human. I love everything there is about being human in a natural sense. So I don't like messing with myself. I don't like messing with my body's natural rhythms and cycles and the way that it's supposed to be. Because the human body is amazing. Like, it is absolutely incredible. And I think a lot of people really, what's the word I'm looking for? They don't appreciate it. They don't appreciate just how incredible it is to be a human. And so much of our modern society is so out of alignment with what it is to be a human. So I try to be as natural as I possibly can in modern day society. I would love to live out in a cabin in the middle of the woods somewhere, trust me, but I would still miss my creature comforts as well, which I do enjoy. Some aspects of modern society, like having internet, it's great. I love it.
Exactly. Yes.
It keeps us connected and informed. So that was my driving factor. However, there has been an incredibly long list of other side effects and benefits that I had absolutely no idea were going to happen. And I didn't want to bring those things back. So even before I was on birth control, I did struggle with depression and anxiety. There's been trauma in my life that I've been, working through and dealing with over the past few years. So that sort of exacerbated the anxiety and depression. And then being on birth control, it made it worse. Like some days I felt like my brain was broken. Like I had thoughts that just weren't right. Thoughts about being a mother, being a woman, just really not thoughts that they were not mine, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
so
it does.
I knew that birth control was making other things worse for me. So driving factor. But prior to that, there had been some really interesting things happen. So the first thing was the bloating. The bloating went away, and the pain and the heaviness after eating. And then I noticed that my gums stopped bleeding when I was brushing my teeth. No more bleeding gums. Okay, that's really interesting. My nose also stopped bleeding. I used to get blood nose when I would blow my nose. It's weird. Why is my nose always bleeding? That stopped. I also had really sore teeth all of the time. Like I had cavities in my teeth. I couldn't chew. Basically on this side of my mouth, I couldn't chew at all. And after a few months on animal base, all that pain went away. Right? And then next thing I noticed, so I wake very early in the morning on purpose. I have a very solid morning routine that I follow. And regardless of if I want to get out of bed, I get out of bed. It's always between 4:30 and 5 a.m. That waking up early became easy. So before animal based, I would drag my ass out of bed. I'd hit snooze for 20 minutes. Like I'd sleepily go to the coffee. I still go to the coffee, but it was I don't want to get up, Now I actually hear my alarm and I want to get up. I'm actually excited to face the day. So it's I have more energy in general. So sleeping is easier, waking is easier. So there's been, a lot of additional benefits that I had no idea would even take hold. I also suffered with rosacea. That has almost completely gone. It still comes and goes depending on what foods I'm testing out at the time, but that's almost completely gone. I used to have really like broken. I thought they were just all broken capillaries in my cheeks. That's all gone. So yeah, and body odor. Body odor is gone. I don't have to wear deodorant anymore. You know, I don't smell. It's wonderful. And bad breath, and you know, just everything. It's been unreal.
I love that. Like, as I'm listening to you, I'm like, yep, check,
Yeah.
check those things too. Like, you know, I rarely would put on deodorant now too, like because I'm not being triggered. Like, it's, you know, I'm like, oh, hang on, I don't smell. So I'm not being triggered to put something on to kind of block a smell. And the same, you mentioned about your teeth. And I have a tooth that needs to be pulled out, but I haven't gone that pathway yet because it's not been settled anywhere. And I just don't even want to get it done. But I've not had a toothache in that tooth that, you know, essentially probably needs to be pulled since, like, you know, at least a couple months into carnivore. And I eat on that tooth. I don't avoid it. Like, it just, you know, is not painful to me, which is, like, again, another really good sign. And I hadn't really thought about that much until you actually started to talk about it then. But the other thing that you brought up was waking up. And I found that for me, like, prior to carnivore, I was probably maybe getting up 6 or 7. And it was like, oh, okay, I've got to get up and I've got to do the things. And naturally, I just started to wake up at like 4:35, depending on like whether we're in a tent or whether, like, right now we're in a house. When we're in a tent, as soon as the sun comes up, I'm ready to go. And or like as soon as it starts to peek out, I'm like, okay, there's sunshine. I need to go see the sun coming up. And, you know, my natural rhythms really started to settle just with carnivore. And I'm sure some of that has helped with us being like living in a tent and having the natural, you know, cycles actually take place for us. But it was easy to do. It wasn't like, oh, I've got to force myself to get up and watch the sunrise. It was like, oh, the sunrise is coming. I'm going to get up and watch the sunrise. And it, you know, most of my kids are still sleeping at that point in time. So I'm up and kind of enjoying some quiet time and just pondering and thinking and doing things before they actually start to wake up as well. So that, for me, again, you saying that about you, I'm like, yeah, waking up is so much easier to do than
it's
when
lighter, it's a lighter feeling. So when you just need to sleep, you feel heavy and you're exhausted. But when you've just gotten rid of all of that shit from your body, the shit you don't need that's weighing you down, you have more energy and you're lighter, and life is better. It's happy.
I agree. And that's where I think for me, like, and you mentioned at the beginning as well, that there's like an exchange, like there's an exchange in regards to the variety in your food to having more freedom in all of these other spaces in your actual life. And, you know, I absolutely agree with that. There was something else you mentioned at the start too, which was like you were known as the health nut. And I'm kind of like really interested as to what your friends, family, and the people like have maybe followed your journey as you've gone through vegetarianism, veganism, raw veganism, now to like, I'm eating meat and that's all I'm really kind of eating. Like, how has that transition gone for you?
Well, I don't have many friends, so they don't have many opinions. But the ones who have stuck around, they have sort of said things about, you know, going from the vegan to the carnivore. Like, that's a very interesting transition. There's always been, how do I put this? I've been a searcher for a very long time. Like, I'm always searching for growth and development and getting healthier and everything like that. So it's been a bit of a natural progression for me to always be changing what I'm eating. So, you know, whether it's been, I've tried so many of the, you know, diets over the years for, I'll go through some of them. So obviously vegetarian, vegan, autoimmune protocol, low FODMAP, gluten-free, dairy-free, I don't know, there's more, but I can't think of them right now. So over the years, the people who are closest to me, they've always seen this change of progression because they know that I've got health problems that I'm trying to fix. So I guess it's not so shocking for them to see me trying something else, but this is the longest I have stuck, except for vegetarianism. Sorry, that was 2 years. This has been 18 months with me with animal-based and carnivore. So this is one of the longest times that I've stuck. Everything else sort of was a little bit shorter term. So it's not so shocking for them. Obviously, though, carnivore goes against everything we've ever been taught about nutrition and mainstream nutrition. So it's been fun educating them. The ones who want to know, the ones who don't want to know, I don't bother. The ones who want to know, it's been quite fun, and I like shocking people. I like to say things that make them go, you know. So when they ask me questions about, you know, cholesterol and all that sort of thing, to be able to have an answer for them that's very shocking, it's fun for me.
I'm kind of a bit like that too. Like that's fun for me. And I could talk about nutrition all day long in all of the different facets and all the different ways. So I find that element fun as well. Especially when people have been taught, like you just mentioned, the cholesterol myth, which is essentially, you know, made up by Ansel Keys, who cherry-picked data that fit into his hypothesis and discarded all of the other data. And, you know, that then has been used to create, essentially, my point of view is that it's been used to create a health crisis within the population by the low-fat movement and the vilification of eating meat and all of that type of stuff. So, you know, I kind of like that too. I try to refrain a little bit, but you know, secretly inside, I want to say the things. So I'm curious as well, like socially for you, has it really altered or changed anything?
No, I have no social life. I really don't. I'm not interested in being out with other people. I have my people that I like to be with, but no, generally, no. I've never been much of a drinker. I don't drink now for, you know, health reasons. I've never been much of a drinker. I was always a sober driver. So yeah, no, I don't really have that sort of social aspect that worries me. I know a lot of people do because they like to go out to dinners with friends and go for drinks and all of that thing, but it's just not where I find my joy. So I don't do it.
Yeah. So for me, you know, I have a lot of patients that come from all sorts of different spaces. Some are like you that it's not really a big deal for them. For other people, it is a big deal because they're so used to actually, you know, going out for dinner on Friday nights or catching up with friends to have coffee and all of that type of stuff. And so what I usually say to them is that carnivore probably makes that easier out of all of the dietary things that you can actually do, because most places you could go and order some eggs and some steak.
Yeah, that's true.
Or some fish or something else. Like there's usually something there that you can order. Whereas, you know, I'm a GAPS practitioner as well. And so for people who are on GAPS, that's a much harder thing for them to do until they've transitioned all the way through into like full GAPS, to be able to go out and actually buy something out. Whereas I think carnivore, for those really socially out there people, is much easier to actually handle, because you can buy something and still feel like you're a part of it. But also the other thing I usually tell people is, remember, what's the point of going to the dinner? Is it to just eat food? Because if that's the case, you might as well stay home and do that. Or is it actually to connect with other people? So let's change the focus from the food to the other people that you're actually with. Like, and I set them secret missions. Like, okay, next time you go out for dinner, I want you to have this secret mission of how much can I get this person to talk and make their food go cold? Like, that's your mission. That is your mission. You need to come back and report on it. But the thing is, what they learn by doing that is how engaged that person was and how much more they enjoyed the gathering, because they were really curious about the person that they were with versus what am I going to eat? So take the focus off of that and put it onto the people.
We tend to like to have a drink in our hand or food in front of us to keep us busy on ourselves rather than opening up and connecting with everybody else. It gives us something to do. And that's, you know, if everyone's standing around with a drink and you haven't got one, it feels you feel very out of it. If you've got an ulterior motive or whatever you want to call it, that's beyond the food and the drink, that would be very helpful to shift that perspective.
And that's the goal, is actually to remember, what's the purpose of standing together with everybody holding a drink? What is the purpose? To talk with each other. It's not to stand there and drink. It's actually to connect with each other. So let's put our focus on that connection versus what might or might not be actually in your cup or on your plate. And
really true.
Get really good at asking really good questions. So one of my favorite questions, and this is for the benefit of everyone at home that's watching it, is moving from what do you do as your job, but what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to pose that question to you. What, Ali, are you actually passionate about?
Ooh. Couple of things. Okay, so my passion has always been helping other people become empowered. So my first business, my first career of my adult life was actually teaching martial arts full-time to women. So I loved helping women become empowered and confident and really owning who they are. And I did that through martial arts, through teaching martial arts. It was more than that. It was more beyond the hitting and the kicking. There was a lot of great conversations. I was the only female instructor of like 20 odd men, the first and only. So a lot of women who wanted to get involved in martial arts, who maybe were afraid to train with a man because of past traumas, a lot of them had had abuse in the past, would come to me because it was more comfortable for them. I was very young at that time. I hadn't had my own traumas at that stage, so I was very young and naive, but I was easy to talk to. And, you know, I found that a lot of women would sort of start training. Sorry about the lighting too. We've got clouds going in and out, so it's sort of hitting my face.
So good.
A lot of women would come and say, oh, I just want a little bit of fitness and, you know, just want to get a bit toned. And after about 10 minutes of talking to me, I would get the entire whole life story. And then from that, we could build them back up again through getting fitter and punching shit and learning to fight, but really feeling that power on the inside. So I did that until I fell pregnant with my son. So after I became a mum, I became quite lost. I didn't really know what my purpose was anymore, I suppose. So over the last maybe couple of years, I've been trying to build businesses online based around that. And it's come to where we are now, which is I'm coaching people to eat a meat-based diet because it's not just about the food. It's about helping people make empowered decisions and really understanding how much power and control they have over their lives. And it's a bit of a balance. So to me, is it the food that comes first that makes you feel well enough to feel powerful to make better decisions, or does feeling empowered have to come first to make the decision to only eat, you know, healthy food? So, you know, there's the chicken before the egg situation. But what I love is helping people realize how powerful they actually are. That's whatever space it's in, martial arts, whether it's journaling and self-discovery, if it's your diet, whatever it is, that's what I really love, because most people have no idea how powerful they are. They really just live in this, they get told what to do all of the time and that there's nothing they can do. They can't change their circumstances. They can't change the way they are. They can't change their thoughts, and that's bullshit. So that's what I love.
I love that. And you are definitely a woman of my own heart. We should be best friends. Now, I say that because I have a coaching, like a carnivore coaching space as well. And there is exactly that balancing act. For me, because I come from the naturopathic field, most people come to me from the diet perspective already. And so for them, you know, as we start to improve their diet, there will become a phase in which they either keep going forward because they're getting healthier, or they sabotage the fuck out of themselves.
Yeah.
And that for me is like actually where the gold is. It's like in that moment of you're about to sabotage, that's where we find the gold of the beliefs, of the programming, of all of the different stuff that's gone into helping you believe that you're not worth it, that there's something wrong with you, that you're broken, that you're not allowed to have good things, all of that type of stuff. And that's where the real part of it is. Like the meat diet is actually part of the vehicle of getting all of you holistically healthy and well, so that you can let go of those stories that have trapped you and kept you actually stuck and kept you doing all that self-sabotaging cycles. And that for me is my favorite part of it. Like the meat-based stuff is kind of like, this is just the mechanical, like, you know, this is mechanical. Yes, we need to tweak this and we need to change this. We might need to up your fat and lower this and, you know, bring in some iodine and do all of those other things. That's just the mechanical movement. But the real gold part is when you realize that you've been sold a lie, that you can then change that. And because you've been the one that's created the meanings and the stories that are going on in your head, you also are the powerful one that can go, hang on, I'm changing that and I'm deciding something different right now. And you essentially get to change your own mind, which for me is like the actual gold part of doing the work that you and I are both actually doing right now.
Well, I agree. I completely agree. And I've said, you know, in on my website where you're talking about working with me, if you're looking for somebody that's going to tell you your macros, micros, and get into the nitty-gritty of what you should and should not be eating, I'm not the coach for you. Because for me, it's all about this. And I want people to feel empowered to make their own decisions and eat more intuitively than going, oh shit, today I haven't had, you know, the 20 or something grams of fat that I'm supposed to eat. But if you don't want it, you don't crave it, you don't need it, why do you have to force it? So, you know, to me, it's all about that, finding your own empowerment in your choices and becoming educated and informed, not because somebody told me to. Because that's what we've always been doing our whole lives. We've been following the rules that have been laid out for us that have been keeping us sick.
Yeah. And I absolutely agree with you. I literally, like 2 minutes before jumping on with you, finished uploading a video on fasting, where I'm currently in the middle of a fast. And that fast has only been because I've not been hungry, not because I'm like, oh, I need to do a fast and I need to stop myself from eating and, you know, all of these benefits. And yeah, I'm going to get all those benefits. But I actually have been fasting, not because I'm fasting, but because I'm not hungry. And that's the space that we want to come out of with all of our foods, whether it be, you know, we need to change our fat ratios, we need to change these other things. Sometimes you do need a little bit of external help to just adjust those things. But majority, the goal for me, and I'm sure many other practitioners, is to get you to the space of, oh, hang on, I've got a little bit of constipation. I probably haven't had enough fat. Maybe I need to do that. What would be a really delicious way for me to do that? And bringing our mindset back to what is driving our actions versus the sickness within our body driving how we think and feel about ourselves, and this story of we can't have anything and we're no good and we're nothing and we're all of these other things that, you know, a lot of my clients come along with.
Yeah. And I think you make a good point with the, you know, listening to your body. It's really hard to listen to your body when it's full of shit. So if you're eating junk food and food that doesn't actually fuel you and it weighs you down, it messes with your brain, it puts everything out of balance, it's going to tell you, I want more sugar, I want more carbs, you know, I want alcohol, I want to have McDonald's for breakfast, because that's what you've just been feeding. Once you actually remove all of that nonsense, you can actually start to listen and know what you need, not just what the little creatures inside your body are telling you that they want, that are ultimately making you sicker. So I think that people talk about, oh, intuitive eating, it's great, but if you're eating trash, you're not really eating intuitively.
Exactly.
You have to listen when there's too much noise.
And I think that's a really great point. So I'll give an example. For me, Christmas, it was probably 2 days before Christmas. It was 23rd of December, and we were about to go buy Christmas presents. So our family tradition is we pull each other's name out of the hat, and I have 7 kids, so they all pull each other's name out of the hat, and you know, they buy for that one person, and that's basically how we have done Christmas from the beginning of time to now. So everyone had their person, and we're about to go and buy presents, and our van broke down on the side of the road. And we were an hour and a half out of a big town. We were close to a little town and we had to go back to that. But that was a very stressful situation because, like, there we are, no Christmas presents because we couldn't get to the shop. So we had to spend money on the car and everything. Like in that moment in time, I was like, oh my God, I don't know how to deal with this. And eventually I had some money. I went down and brought some presents. Like I ended up doing the first thing, you know, I've never done this before where I was the only person buying presents for everyone, but I went out and picked little gifts for everyone. And I walked into this bakery that also had like books, and I've got kids that love books. So I went in there and I picked out this book for my kid, and they had the most delicious looking carrot cake. And I was like, oh my God, carrot cake is my favorite. Yeah. Like, you know, there are a couple of things, like I think we all have them, those couple of things that just make us go, oh, this is a hard decision. And I saw this carrot cake and I was just looking at it going, oh, I really want carrot cake. And what I said to myself in my head is, you're going through such a shit time. You deserve the carrot cake. And I thankfully caught myself in that moment and I went, hang on. Do I really deserve carrot cake? What is this carrot cake going to give me? Maybe about 5 minutes of some type of enjoyment, but then it's going to make me feel tired, give me a headache, make me feel shit. Is that what I actually deserve right now? Is that going to help this situation get better? Now, that's where I think we kind of just need to bring in a little bit of a pause sometimes when it comes to intuitive eating and go, hang on, what is this going to give me? Yeah. And is that what I actually want and what I deserve right now? And tapping back into the do I really deserve shit in my life? Like, is that how I believe that I need to be treated? Like all of that type of stuff, which is the place where I think it's really at. And I know that you are launching at the moment a mindset program. Like I've seen on Instagram that you've got like a beautiful little reel. A beautiful little reel talking about that. Do you want to like give a little bit of information about that?
Sure. Okay. So for people who don't follow me and haven't seen the reel, I made the video essentially because my partner was questioning my decisions. He's great. But he was, said to me, well, why would you launch your first product? And it's my first product. The business is very new. About mindset when you are an animal-based carnivore nutrition coach. Like, why not be giving them how to be an animal-based person? And the simple answer is, when talking about the mindset, is people know what to do. People know what they should be eating. Generally, most people know that they're eating junk food. Like there's obviously the exceptions where people maybe don't realize that maybe pasta is causing an issue for them, but they have been told that if you eat whole grain pasta, it's good for you. So, but generally speaking, people know that they're not eating well. And they have probably purchased nutrition programs in the past. They've probably purchased exercise programs in the past. They've probably started a 30-day challenge in the past and not completed it. Most people know what they should be doing, but this is what holds them back. So I thought it would be beneficial, or I can't think of the word, but I thought it would be better to offer a product that helps people learn how to shift that mindset first and to have more self-discovery before they make any changes. Because I could literally hand you and as part of it, I've got food lists in there, I've got, menus in there and snacks, and I've got that information in there. But without the mindset, making changes is very, very difficult. And something as huge as transitioning from the standard diet to a carnivore diet, it's extremely overwhelming. And when most people have a very large task to complete, it's too overwhelming, they just don't do it. Most people don't know how to break things down into bite-sized pieces. So that's what this mindset product is about shifting this, having the ability to break down your goals, having the opportunity to get really clear on your why. I talked about mine was birth control, my why. When you're really clear on why you're doing things and you sort of really touch on those pain points and you give those pain points a lot of attention, you start to realize why you need to make changes. And if you start thinking about, if I was in the exact same position as I am now in 12 months' time, how is that going to make me feel? Most people would not be happy about that. But they don't put any attention on it on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
They just go about their lives very unaware, very autopilot of what's actually happening. Everything is just so, we all have routines. We all have our daily routines, but most people's routines are not serving them in any way. So my thoughts is to get you really aware of those things, aware of what you're eating, aware of what you're thinking, aware of the self-sabotaging thoughts, how to change them, and then how to break things down into little tiny daily habits, because those little tiny daily habits done every single day are going to create that big change that you're looking for. So a lot of people try to do, and some people do it. Some people can just rip a Band-Aid off and overnight change their lives. I can't. Within a few days, I'm going back to the way that things were because it's too much change. But if you've got a big goal of losing, say, 50 kilos, I usually use weight as an example because I have lost a lot of weight. I put on like 30 kilos when I was pregnant and it didn't go anywhere for like 2 years. So it was a huge amount of weight for me to lose as somebody who had never been overweight. So it was too much to fathom. Okay, I've got 30 kilos to lose. I'm never going to be able to do that. But breaking it down into daily habits. Okay, well, I could probably go for a 20-minute walk every day, and if I do that every single day, I'm going to get to my ultimate goal of losing 30 kilos without even thinking about the weight. And then if I create that one habit, it's going to make me feel really good. Then it's going to make me want to change something else, and that'll create another habit. And before I know it, my daily habits and routines are actually serving me instead of making me feel worse. So that mindset program is about really shining a torch on all of that before you make any changes, before you decide that you're not going to eat vegetables for the rest of your life, because, or not vegetables, even cake, everybody wants some cake every now and then. But that's quite, that's huge, to not be eating the foods that you love. So why do you need to? And that's where all of that mindset comes into it. And then once you've done that and really shone that torch on all of those things and started making those changes internally, then the external changes can add on from that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you. The why is a really important thing. Like the idea of I just want to lose 30 kilos or whatever many kilos that number is often not enough for people to actually start to make the changes or implement the changes. So then, the next question is, so for what purpose would you want to lose those 30 kilos? Like, for what purpose does that serve? Well, maybe it means that you can run around after your grandkids. Okay, awesome. So for what purpose would you want to run around after your grandkids? So that they can feel bonded and connected and loved by me. And for what purpose do you want them to feel that? Because I want everything for them. And then at that point, now you've got a big enough why, because it's not just you losing the 30 kilos, it's that you want everything for your grandbabies and you want to be able to give that and be a part of that and do all of that type of stuff with them. And so absolutely the why is super important as to what we're actually doing, so then we can create those habits that really do work for us versus against us. And you're so right there. Now, you've mentioned... You go.
The actual feelings that come with that goal. So yes, you might just, lose 20 kilos, but everything else that comes with it, like you said, that's what's really important to get very clear on. And how would you feel if that didn't happen? That little bit of pain there, and then you flip it to those really good feelings.
Yeah, I love it. So you've mentioned a couple of times that you've got children and a partner. So we're all curious, do they eat carnivore or do they eat meat-based, or like where are they in this journey?
So they are mostly animal-based with a few other things thrown in there too. So my partner is 95 kilos, 6'1", and of muscle. So he goes to the gym every day. So he eats a crap ton of food. So with our minimal budget, we couldn't afford for him to be 100% carnivore, if I'm being completely honest. And he also requires other carbohydrates like potato and rice and everything like that. That's what makes him feel good. That's what makes him build muscle. Now, I'm sure there is plenty of carnivores out there that disagree with the need for carbohydrates, but he has them. So essentially his diet is mostly animal-based with a few other things thrown in. So yeah, meat-based would be a good term for it. My son would be very similar. With him, we don't do grains. And the reason we don't do grains for him is he was a very sick baby. When he was 3 months old, he got contracted meningitis, and he was pumped full of all the drugs, which saved his life. Obviously, I'm very grateful for that, but it also did a lot of damage in the process. And over the next sort of few years, me not knowing any better either, I didn't realize that I had to heal his gut. He just caught everything. He was constantly sick, more antibiotics, more antibiotics, more antibiotics, and it was just this vicious cycle. And the naturopath that helped me was actually originally his naturopath. I took him to her because the doctors just kept saying, oh, it's normal. Here, have some steroids. Here, have some antibiotics. Kids get sick. It's normal, blah, blah, blah. And I just got to the point where, well, hang on a minute. Might be normal for everyone else, but as far as I'm concerned, it's not normal. So we saw my naturopath. Her name was Jeannie. And she said to me to get rid of gluten and dairy for him, and we'll start healing his gut. That was just a good starting point. Eventually, obviously, as we got to know each other a lot more, she started divulging more information and things like that. And we got him to animal-based. So he can have dairy now and not react to it. He can have, he doesn't have any grains, no grains at all. Sometimes he might have like a fermented sourdough with me, but I do notice that his hay fever symptoms react when he has some grains. So we try to keep them as very, very rare as like a treat, because he loves his bread. So probably for the last, well, since I started animal-based, he has essentially been animal-based as well, or meat-based, we'll call it, because he does have some other vegetables and everything as well. So his diet is essentially meat, fruit, and root vegetables, and dairy and eggs and all of that. But we have desiccated organs, which he has also as part of his daily diet, very small amounts of liver, but no packaged and processed foods and junk and sugar and things like that. That's saved for birthday parties and special occasions where he's allowed to do whatever he wants. I don't restrict that, but at home it's very clean. Yeah.
So what benefits have you kind of seen for him? Like, you know, you talked about him being quite sick, etc. Did you see some significant benefits for him as you started to make those changes?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So he used to have like chronic hay fever. He was constantly had hay fever. And, you know, that was just something, that's just what he had. So the doctor said, just give him Claritine every day. It's safe. Okay, cool. And I did. So he had chronic hay fever. He got sick a lot. He used to complain of tummy aches a lot. But also too, I don't know if this is the platform for this, but he would have very, very easily been diagnosed with ADHD and oppositional defiance disorder very easily. Would I have been that kind of parent, let's say? So I read a book called Brain. It's a great book, Dr. David Perlmutter, I think it is. Yeah. Wonderful book. And that is what made me realize that I needed to get rid of grains from my son's diet. And very significant changes in his mental state. No more ADHD. He has the normal oppositional defiance that a child should have. I think that's normal. They should push back. But what we started noticing, and what best thing is, he started noticing. So when he had some junk food, he would say, "Mummy, my brain is moving too fast and I can't think." he'd actually be, my brain's moving too fast, like he couldn't do it. So we would, yeah, he started noticing. So very interesting. And also too, I've noticed that when he does have sugar and junk food, he has nightmares also.
Yep.
So there has been, yeah, it's quite significant, the changes in him. So, and he doesn't have chronic hay fever anymore. Like, it's rare. So yeah, pretty big.
That's really awesome. One of the things that I talk to my families with ADHD, ADD, anything autism that's on that alphabet sort of spectrum, diagnosed letters, is essentially for these people, they have things like gene mutations, like they've probably got MTHFR and some other things that are going on in the background, but they also have what is known as a brewer's stomach, which is where for them, depending on how they are on that spectrum, they're converting some of the sugar that they're actually eating, whether it be fructose, glucose, or something else that's coming from carbs, into alcohol. And so if we imagine these kids that are getting diagnosed with ADHD or autism are actually all day walking around with a cup of wine in their hands, like if we literally,
very interesting.
Yeah, if we literally saw them with a cup of wine in their hand, we would stop them from having it. And we would not expect them to be able to sit down in a classroom and behave and be able to create logical functions and have control of their faculties, because adults can't. So why would we expect kids to?
Exactly.
And so that plays right into what's also happening along with those grains and those other carbohydrate rich foods that are coming in, that are damaging the gut, where they've got leaky gut and all sorts of other things that are going on. So I'm super glad that you found that for your son. I'm sure you are as well.
Absolutely.
I would love for more parents to actually start to discover that information and start to learn that just because you get given a diagnosis doesn't mean you can't do something about it. Just like with endometriosis, it doesn't mean you can't do something about it. There are loads of things out there that you can do, even if it's just to optimize what's going to happen for that child.
Yeah. Some, like you said, there are obviously exceptions where diet may not get rid of it 100%, but there is definitely a way to improve things. And if the body is functioning well and it's being fed the right foods to function well, it does make a very, very big difference. Even as an adult, having that food, I get brain fog if I have that food. I feel anxious. So if I have some plants, like if I'm not ready for them, I've recently had some onions and garlic and things as part of I was testing. I actually had severe anxiety the next day.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And this happened maybe about 12 months ago as well. I made a keto lasagna for my son and it was delicious and I had to have some. And the next day I had anxiety. So, I don't know how to explain that. I've got no idea, but I noticed those and noticed that's such a big change. So imagine how our kids are feeling when we're giving them tiny teddies for morning tea.
Exactly. And you had the capacity of an adult to go, it was something in the lasagna that was not good for me. This is why I'm feeling this way, versus I feel like this all of the time because I'm eating shit all of the time, or I'm eating, even if you're eating, like, this is the conversation that I often have with people, is that, just because something is natural doesn't mean that it's necessarily good for us individually. So if I'm running a hair analysis, and I of course have done them for my whole family, my husband came back as apples as a problem for him. At that point in time, I wouldn't have thought, oh, we should remove apples from your diet. But when we did, there was a significant increase in his energy levels just by removing apples. The same with my son. Lettuce came back as an issue for him. Again, in my natural naturopath mind, before I went down the pathway of like meat-based and going into carnivore, I would not have considered that lettuce could be a problem for anyone, and yet again, then I started to observe him and he would eat the salad but not eat the lettuce. I'm like, oh, he kind of naturally knows that this is not necessarily good for him. And, again, when we took it out, we started to see different changes in his actual behavior as well. And so that's the individual bio sort of feedback that we actually get. And as an adult, you can do that type of stuff. But as a child, imagine trying to explain to somebody, I don't feel good and I think it's this food.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it would
exactly.
be incredibly difficult for them to do, especially because for a lot of them, they're actually addicted to that food. Like,
Yeah, big
you
time.
know, especially if it's sugar based or really high carb based, like there's, they're addicted to it because it's feeding pathogenic bacteria, it's feeding parasites that are controlling the way that their brain thinks and feels and all of that type of stuff. So
They're like
it's
little addicts.
exactly.
Yeah.
Like I've had a patient once where we moved them onto GAPS and they were doing GAPS intro. So it was basically meat, broth, vegetables that were cooked in broth. That was basically it, maybe some herbs and spices. And they thought a burglar had entered their house because at 3 o'clock in the morning, there was this big banging that was happening in their kitchen. And they went out like with a stick thinking they were going to have to defend their family. And it was their daughter, who was 3, had climbed to the very top shelf of their cupboard, pulled out the last of their sugar that they just put up right at the top,
Wow.
and was sitting on the kitchen floor eating sugar out of the actual bowl, because that's how strong those bugs can actually interfere and into communicate with our brains. And so, we're expecting children to be able to control that and communicate that. No, they need us as parents to step in and go, that's not good for you. Let's remove this and let's get rid of these things so that you can actually be you. And the amount of parents that I have that might say, this feels really bad to say, but I don't think I even like my child.
Yeah.
And
haven't we all been there?
Yeah. But it's because who they're dealing with is not actually their child. They're dealing with the parasites, the pathogens, the alcohol, the other stuff that's going on. And when you clear that, they go, you know what you just did? You gave me my baby back. Like, I see that little precious person again, because there's not all of this stuff controlling them and making them have outbursts, and they're not able to like control or talk or language things because of all of the stuff that was in there rolling around. So I think it's really powerful.
All the shit that takes away from being a human. It's not real. I think just off the back of that, when I first started learning about this way of eating, I was listening to a podcast by Paul Saladino, and he was talking about the innate wisdom of children. And children don't instinctively eat vegetables. They will instinctively eat meat and fruit. Sure, if you put crackers in front of them, they'll eat that as well. It's carbohydrate, but they're not reaching for the broccoli. No, to get children to eat vegetables, they have to be hidden and smothered in different flavors and everything like that. But if I put down a plate of set potatoes, my son loves potatoes, I wonder where I got that from. He will eat the meat first. The meat will always be eaten first. With the other, when he was eating vegetables, he would eat the meat first. So I used to actually steam him a plate of vegetables for afternoon tea, so he would eat vegetables and not fill up on meat. So he would actually eat them and get that into his system before he had the meat. But I'd have to smother them in sauce for him to actually eat them. But in my mind, I thought, well, at least he's getting all the nutrients that are in these vegetables, despite the sauce being on top of them. But it's never what kids wants to sit down and eat vegetables. And I think we've been forced our whole lives. We tell them, forgetting that they're so much closer to nature than what we are. They're so much more closer to their instincts and their intuition than what we are. So maybe we should have listened to them.
Absolutely. And I have a lot of parents that come to me and they're like, my kid won't eat vegetables. I'm like, don't make him.
Yeah,
it's fine. Don't make him. Yay for him for not wanting to eat those vegetables, because ultimately, and I think this is part of the conversation too, is that we have a lot of food science out there that says, this has got this in it, this has got this in it, and this has got this in it. But we've negated that just because in a lab they've been able to extract a certain amount of iron out of spinach doesn't mean that when that spinach is in your body, you're able to do that. Because the tools that they've used are high heat, they've used high acid, all of which you don't possess in your gut. So how are you going to get it out of there? And really, when we look at it from a realistic point of view, only using what we actually have available in our digestive system, doesn't matter how much iron is in that spinach, you only get 2% of it.
Yeah.
Versus if you eat a steak, you're getting about 70% of that. And that's vastly different. And we've got a lot of food science that is directed towards, parents and people as individuals about this type of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily realistic.
Yeah. I think your sort of really important point. We've got more information than ever, and we're more disconnected and misinformed than ever. If you think about it, like I just sort of think, okay, before industrial agriculture, before farming, like industrial farming, before all of that, what did we eat?
Mm-hmm.
Primarily we hunted and we gathered, sure, and then we started farming. But primarily we are hunters and gatherers. So what do we have now that would have grown in the wild, or grown before we had genetically modified stuff and before we had certain types of fertilizers and pesticides? What would have grown? Probably not much of it, or any of it. Most of the stuff that we eat, we can't find in nature, So I sort of think, I think about it as simply as I possibly can, is before all of that, I'm going to eat that way. Before industrial agriculture and farming, I'm going to eat meat and seasonal fruits and vegetables, maybe when I can stomach them. But if, I live in a tropical climate. I live on the Gold Coast in Australia. It's hot here. Things grow all year round here. So that's pretty good, right? But if I'm living in Tasmania in Australia, where it gets really cold and it snows, I'm not going to have access to the produce that I have up here. So I'm not going to eat it. That's sort of how I think about it. And in winter in those places, there wouldn't have been produce. There wouldn't have been anything growing. So all I'm going to eat is meat, because that's what's available. So
exactly.
That's how I think about it, without all the complicating science, without all the books that I've read, without everything. If I just sort of chunk it right down into the most natural state I can be in, that's what I would eat.
Yep.
Yeah.
I love it. And having traveled, at least I've gone up to Rockhampton. That's as far as we've gotten so far, because we are from Tasmania. And it got a little bit too hot in the middle of summer for us Tasmanians. We might go back up there during winter. I've not seen a broccoli growing in the wild. I've not been out in the bush and seen broccoli or any of these other things, like definitely not seen a cauliflower in the wild, any of those types of things. But I have seen a lot of kangaroos. I have seen a lot of other animals that I could potentially eat. Like we've seen a ton of quails, we've seen a ton of other animals that we could potentially actually eat as a food source. And that just from that traveling mindset of what we're actually seeing and what's available to us, it's much more predominantly animals than it is going to be edible plants that we have been able to find naturally growing in a natural environment in the wild. So I think that's a really good point as well.
Yeah.
And I will just sort of add as well that, for those that are watching at home, like I talked about this, I'm in the middle of doing a presentation of MTHFR with a group of people. And we talked about what should somebody with MTHFR actually eat. And my perspective on that is it should be either somewhere along the parameters of hypercarnivore all the way to the lion's diet, based on what their actual physiology is and their state of their health, which, hypercarnivore includes some plant matter. It's about 30% plant matter, and then 70% of actual meat and animal products. And then if they're sick, then they need to go further along in towards that carnivore space. So anywhere in that sort of tends to fit both that space of what's naturally available in our environment, but you have to be able to digest it before it's actually going to be beneficial to you.
Yeah, that's really true as well. That's what I'm working on with my gut health, is my inability to digest plants. And from what I have learned recently with learning about the GAPS diet, is the more damaged the digestive tract, the less it's going to be able to tolerate plants. So that just shows me that I've got a lot of healing to do, which is exciting, because I know that there is more healing to be done. Like I'm not stuck here, there's more, and there's always more. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if people are listening to this and they are like, oh my gosh, I want to reach out to Ali, or I want to like follow her and all of that type of stuff, where are they going to find you?
Predominantly on Instagram. I don't have any other social media channels because it's too much for me. Eventually one day I might. So just on Instagram, which is the at Eat Meat Live Free. But you can also, I've got a website that is www.aligreig.com, and that's ALIGREIG. That's my name, Ali Greig. I also have another business which is all about teaching people how to have a good morning, how to actually set up a really good morning routine for themselves. So if that's something of interest as well, I have another Instagram called Morning Mindfulness Journal. And this is the actual journal that I created. So that's available on Amazon as well, but that's another site that I have, another passion of mine. I'm multifaceted. Yeah,
I love it.
These are the three places where I am, and I'm always happy to chat. So send me a DM or an email or whatever. I love having a chat.
Awesome. Awesome. So I want to thank you so much for coming onto my channel. I want to leave with this kind of thought. If somebody's watching this and they're going, you know, I think I want to start this journey, what would be your like top tips that you would give them?
Read as many books as you can on alternative nutrition. And listen to the experts and get a very well-rounded, what's the word I'm looking for? Sorry, I'll always lose my words. A very well-rounded perspective before you dive in. I think when you are educated, you are in a better position to make powerful decisions for yourself. So before I got started, I just dove headfirst into the research with the people that my naturopath told me to start with. Do you want me to suggest some books that I've read?
Yeah, if you've got a few that you'd love to recommend, go for it. What are they?
I've got a million, but probably the first one that I said before was the book Brain. It's not a carnivore book, it's more keto. It's Brain, and it's a really good introduction, I think. And the next one that I love is The Dietitian's Dilemma by Michelle Hearn. And the next one I would say is The Lies My Doctor Told Me by Dr. Ken Berry. They're probably the three people that I would start with if you're going down this journey. And just get educated and get really clear on it all. It's a tough decision to make, and people will question you as well. That, you know, why are you doing this? And it's always good to have someone to refer them to that knows more than you. That's what I do.
Yeah, I love that. And yes, people are going to question. For some people, they just keep it quiet. They just don't tell anybody that they're doing it, and nobody really knows. For me, I can't shut my mouth, so unfortunately everybody knows exactly what I'm doing, and I have to share that, because if I'm feeling great, I need to tell that to other people as well. But you know, find where you sit on that spectrum, and having some of those experts to be able to tap into, like Paul Mason, who talks really well and succinctly about cholesterol. You'll find him on the Low Carb Down Under videos on YouTube. You know, we've got Dr. Chafee, we've got, you know, loads and loads and loads of people if you actually start looking for them. There are plenty of them out there. There's optometrists, there's like, you know, all sorts of different doctors that have been doing it. Dentists.
Oh, yeah. And they're really, really intelligent, educated people. And they know their stuff. They're a good resource to lead people to, and yourself obviously, but if people have questions, they're a good resource.
Yeah, for sure. Good. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. It's been amazing. I love chatting. We totally need to be friends. And when I'm in the Gold Coast, I might like knock on your door, or at least wave on the beach. Good. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you for coming on. And I'm going to pop those links below for anyone who wants to follow Ali at home. I'll put those things below for you so that you can find her. And thank you again for joining us for Conversations with Carnivore. Bye for now.
Thank you.